Welcome to Supervision Simplified. I'm Dr. Amy Parks, and I am so excited to welcome my guest today, Dr. Chris Deussing. We have actually had the opportunity to have some chatting already, and so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's already been a pleasure this morning. Looking forward to the next hour.
Absolutely. So excited. And so could you, for our guest, introduce yourself? I could read your formal bio, but we're kind of informal around here. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Dr. Christopher Deussing. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm licensed in 6 states. Primarily, though, my group practice is working out of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. In terms of my clinical orientations, I am a DBT, Dialectical Behavior Therapy specialist, and I also interweave that with modern psychoanalysis. I spent about 8 years early in my career in psychoanalytic training. I also have a lot of deep interest in existential and humanistic psychology. Love conversing with the folks out at Saybrook University. And also, too, I'm very, very interested in psychedelic therapies. That's a growing part of my practice. And in addition to being a group practice owner, I just love supervision. And one of my missions is to bring the next generation of therapists online in terms of bringing them up to speed and getting them ready for the important work that we do, which is what brought us together, Amy. And I am not a secret agent like you, like we learned in our first podcast.
Yes, no, I am not a secret agent, although I guess that would be fun as a second side hustle. But no, I am not a secret agent, but hey, that could be cool. And I appreciate your desire to work in supervision and to bring up the next generation. And I also appreciate that you use all of your disposable income on being licensed in 6 states, because
Yes,
that's pretty hefty.
yes. For those out there working on the Licensed Clinical Social Worker Compact, let's get caught up to the LPCs because these licensure fees are killing me.
That is crazy. It's interesting that you mentioned that. So, I'm not 100% sure that there's going to be one big licensure fee.
Oh gosh.
I haven't actually heard, I haven't heard confirmation that there's going to be only one fee. Have you heard that?
I have not. That was a fantasy of mine that I was creating from my subconscious, my Freudian subconscious.
That's how the PsyPact works. So my
Uh-huh.
understanding is, and like we need to get someone from ACA on here, and I have that intention. But my understanding is that the PsyPact works that way, and that's the gold standard, that there's one fee. But I'm not 100% sure that's how the counseling compact is supposed to work. And so the social work, there has been some movement in recent months, so that's really exciting, but it's still several years down the road from anything happening significantly. So but the thing that's really unfortunate is, despite the hype, it doesn't really look a whole lot different. I mean, from my perspective, it doesn't really look a whole lot different. I mean, it does a little bit of smoothing but reciprocity is the same word as, a compact is the same thing as reciprocity. So this just moves, it just makes reciprocity easier. Anyway, we could get on the bandwagon about that all day long, but
no, we were talking about like kind of the disparate, this fragmented landscape of supervision. And I think that is mirrored in clinical licensure. So how I came to get licensed in 6 states wasn't really out of, well, it was desire. However, as we all were in the pandemic, I was going crazy in my house, right? And I was thinking, what are some other places I might want to work in my life? And so I just started applying to Florida. I got my license in Colorado, and my favorite license, although I haven't worked with anyone in the state yet, is Hawaii.
Yeah,
so,
super
and
fun.
I learned a lot with applying for these licenses because, for example, like in the state of New Jersey, or I was going to apply to New York, it's a very kind of long process, and there's a backlog. Hawaii, it literally was like aloha, and here's your license 2 days later. So that's how 6 licenses came about.
What would be super fun, Chris, and actually I would love to do this In fact, this is what I'm going to do in the future. I'm going to get licensed in Hawaii. And I was part of the opening of a clinic for children, a family and like a children and teen clinic on Kauai about 3 years ago. And
Hawaii.
well,
Oh,
no, pre-pandemic, so more like 5 years ago now. And so what you could do is now with your license, you could go and live there for like a month and just do a lot of like intensive work with
mhm.
people, like around trauma or around, like marital intensives or something like that. And then just like hit it and then do,
Right.
maybe virtual work. But wouldn't that be amazing? You just
That
have
would
your
be
month in
amazing.
Hawaii. I think that that would be so great. And because it's difficult to find that kind of work there anyway. I mean, for the people that can provide that kind of services, those kind of services there anyway. And don't you have experience in ketamine therapy? Although probably I don't know if you could like transport that and do that there, but isn't that an
Ketamine
area for
assisted
you?
psychotherapy. That's a
Assisted
growing part of my
ketamine.
practice.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's a whole other gamut, a whole other range of topics to talk about with
right.
supervision. Lots of thoughts that I've have around that. It's interesting you bring that up, though. I'm aware of one clinician, Tina Kokul, Kocul, I believe, who does EMDR intensives. And
Mm-hmm.
she, last time I talked with her, this was a while ago, maybe about a year ago, she was putting together an intensive in Hawaii. So I like the idea.
Mm-hmm.
You crushed my dreams about
Oh no.
in terms of the compact. However, you built them
Yeah.
up in Hawaii, which is wonderful. A little bit
Yeah,
of fun fact about me: I'm half Filipino, so I have a large amount of family in Hawaii. I'm a Filipino American, and uh, definitely definitely would love to work there.
there you go. That's the thing to do. Well, the compact, I've been saying for years I'm going to die before we have good reciprocity. And the supervision part of it is like non-existent. I mean, that just doesn't make it any easier to become a supervisor. But I am always impressed by people who've expanded their range of supervision and licensure in multiple states because I think that that's fantastic and it does make it more accessible for the community to be able to have people to be able to work with. And so, Chris, as you have expanded your licensure across these states, have you been doing more work in multiple states? You said you've been doing a little bit more work in multiple states.
A little bit.
Mhm.
There's been a little bit of work with Colorado and in Florida. As I said, I haven't seen any clients in Hawaii, although I'd be open to that. It's just interesting because although getting licensed in multiple states, it creates the ability to practice. It creates kind of a challenge. And I've talked a bit with marketing, SEO specialists, because as you know, with a practice and building a practice, a big part of it is the non-clinical work, the marketing and all that stuff that a lot of private practitioners shy away from. And it's a bit of a challenge to be able to successfully advertise a multi-state practice. So I think again that parallels a lot of this fragmented right
Right.
process of reciprocity between states, different licensing boards. I think that mirrors itself in marketing and multi-state practice.
Yeah.
However, it's something I'm curious about, and if they could clone me, I would I would be more devoted to that. However, I
Yeah.
I have enough trouble keeping up just with the three states that I'm geographically located in.
I bet. I bet. And the majority of your supervision work, where is that occurring?
In Pennsylvania, that's where the
Uh-huh.
majority of my supervision work
Okay.
is occurring. Mhm.
And are most of your supervisees, are they doing the psychodynamic supervision that we've been talking a little bit about? Or is that mostly the work that you did in supervision?
That's mostly the work that I did in supervision. So earlier in my career, I spent about 8 years in psychoanalytic training. Shout out to the Philadelphia School of Psychoanalysis, which is something actually I didn't flesh out in our first podcast earlier this morning. It is a modern psychoanalytic school. Psychoanalysis is not a monolithic thing, as many modalities. So I don't come from a classical school of analysis. It's more the contemporary, modern, neo-Freudian analysis.
Can
So
you
in
can you speak
my,
so
yeah,
Chris, can you
please.
speak a little bit to that? Because just to kind
Mhm.
of clarify for our listeners, like talk a little bit about that difference there so we can understand where you're coming from.
Sure. I mean, so you see all those funny cartoons in the New Yorker or the psychoanalytic cartoons where the analyst is sitting behind the client and the client's on the couch. That's the positioning that I work with my clients. I don't do face-to-face work unless it's necessary, in terms of a regressed client or there needs to be grounding that way. And, the classic cartoon is the therapist or the analyst has fallen asleep behind the client or something like that, right? So that kind of mirrors, nothing against classic analysts. They do incredible work. I know incredible classic analysts. However, with more classic analysis, the therapist, the analyst is kind of a blank slate, right? And they don't self-disclose. They aren't necessarily warm and fuzzy, right? It's more of the client laying on the couch and saying everything, and the therapist mainly remaining silent, which I think that there's a lot of skill involved in that, and working with the transferences and counter transferences that come up into the room. Now, with modern psychoanalysis, not many people know about this, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to drop Dr. Spotnitz, who was a founder of psychoanalysis. Freud originally thought that schizophrenics and that psychotic disorders weren't treatable through classic analysis. Dr. Spotnitz turned that on its head, and he's like, no, we're going to make this work with schizophrenic clients. So he developed this more modern psychoanalytic theory and process where the analyst is a much more malleable, pliable, adaptable entity. So if the client needs silence and needs to run, that's given. If the client needs a different type of object to attach to, it's heavily rooted in object relations theory, and things like that. Whatever the client needs at that point to do the assignment of saying everything. So I like to say that the modern analyst has a bit more range and perhaps is a little bit less rigid than the classic analysis. Although, again, modern psychoanalysis wouldn't exist without classic analysis. We have to remember how each theory builds upon each other.
So when you were under supervision, tell us a little bit about that experience for you.
Well, in terms of individual supervision, I was in a really intensive process. I was training to be a psychoanalyst, which is an incredibly intensive long-term process. Now, traditional supervision lies in terms of, I feel that like cases, we bring cases, right? And we bring questions to the supervision process. Like, how do I handle this clinical process? Now, with a psychoanalytic process, it was fascinating. I mean, I was in my own analysis first off. That's a part of the supervision, right? So learning all my nooks and crannies as best I can, shining light upon all those shadow spots that oftentimes we don't want to shine light upon. That was a big part of it. The other big part of it was clinical supervision consisted of me going in to see my individual supervisor who taught me so much, Dr. Stephen Ellis. I'm so indebted to him. And I would do the assignment of saying everything. I would go in, Dr. Ellis would sit behind me, and I would lay on the couch and I would say everything. Now, I could bring cases in, I could talk about cases, and it was also very free associative. So it could go wherever it needed to. And in that, I also got a clinical side of it, but also a very personal side of it in terms of how myself was infusing itself into sessions, how I was reacting to clients, where that comes from. And that is the kind of special sauce that I feel really blessed to have been a part of in my supervision coming up as an MSW into LCSW status.
It's a very, very different style of supervision from anything that is sort of familiar to me and familiar to sort of the counseling world and probably the traditional social work world.
Yes,
and
very
so
much so.
as you are training social workers now, how have you adapted your supervision style, in light of sort of how you experience that? Because there's a lot of, there's a lot of taboo around that, like bringing in like your own sort of lived experience, your own countertransference. There's a lot of, that you can't separate yourself from the experience of your work. And yet at the same time, there is sort of some setting aside that has to happen. How do you manage all that? And how are you adapting your work now? It's just so fascinating to me.
Well, as we've learned, I see a lot of things in dialectics. So with each, I continually remind myself that each supervisee that I have is an individual, and we can try to make the individual fit the supervision. However, I'm a big proponent of let's make the supervision fit the individual. I'm not putting people through psychoanalytic training. So mine is much more based in the contemporary model of, okay, what cases are going on? What cases are you seeing? What are you having difficulty with? I also like celebrating the wins too. I think oftentimes we miss the mark in terms of let's really talk about what people are doing right in supervision. And
Yeah.
that can be very validating. However, it's an open space. The supervision realm for me, it's an open space for the individual to come in and speak about themselves and their lived experience if they wish. Don't force people to do that. However, I really try to educate people that the personal and the professional, sure, we have some boundaries there. Absolutely. And we want to practice ethically. And in terms of providing, and I see this as a very human endeavor. When we just become providers of modalities, that's all we are. We're not therapists at that point. However, I really like to rehumanize one, the therapies, two, the clients, and three, the clinicians themselves. So, in terms of being human, I'm intensely curious about where my supervisees have come from, where they're at now clinically and also non-clinically. If they're in school, I'm intensely curious about their classes, what resonates, what doesn't resonate. Clients, how they're feeling about clients. A big thing I teach is transference and countertransference. I feel like that is a bit of a word that isn't discussed enough in terms of the feeling states that are between the client and the therapist, in particular, how the therapist is feeling about the client, because there's
Mhm.
so much diagnostic information in there and how to proceed. So that's a bit of a broad answer to your question. It really is a moving target with each individual. And then two, it kind of comes though out of process, out of kind of getting into a groove. And once I have some time with an individual, it really creates itself in a way.
Yeah. I want to hear more about when you're talking to supervisees about this dynamic, that how they feel about the client. Like, tell me more about how that's gone for you when you're talking to supervisees.
Generally very welcoming. Although it takes a lot of people off guard.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I teach a lot of DBT techniques. I teach also, how to run DBT skills groups, all that wonderful protocolized, manualized stuff. And I really try to get creative in adding these elements like transference and countertransference. Um, and also too, again, how the therapist is bringing themselves into the room, how they're present, even just simple things. Can you not go back to back to back for 5 sessions? Can you take 15 minutes to do a reset? I find that people have been very welcomed by it. It's almost like the internship cohort that I'm closing out for the summer. A lot of them have said they've learned kind of the underground art of therapy, the things that aren't presented in university, the things that maybe university doesn't have the time to present. I think there needs to be at the field level, at the field practice level, an element where we fill in the nooks and crannies so that you can get a really holistic education.
I think we should, I just wrote that down. I think we should have that. It's called the underground art.
The underground dark arts, I've called it the dark magic.
Oh,
And
I don't want to call it
who
the
does
dark magic, but I love that. I think that's so cool. But listen, Chris, I really want to dig here because I really think you have a very unique um gift to give us around this, because you have this psychoanalytic experience from your own supervision
Mhm. And my own
and
analysis,
your
and my
own
own analysis,
analysis.
the most
Right,
important part. Right.
right. That none of us had,
Mhm.
or not none of us, but many of us did not have. And now we are working with supervisees who very often, if not all the time, are not in their own therapy or not doing their own work, despite our best efforts to encourage it.
Mhm.
Um, who are maybe in doing work with with clients who they, for whatever reason, are having, you know, experiences with that are fractured in some way. They don't like them, or they are having feelings about them, or they're having experiences that are bringing up issues, or memories, or they're having some transference and countertransference. Like, how I want to dig more into understanding, and as a supervisor, helping them work through that, because that's a really a big thing. And what I'm seeing as a supervisor is an enormous amount of pushback. The pushback is, no, 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 I can handle that. No, 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 it's fine. No, 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 I just turn it off. I'm just gonna turn, I'm just not gonna, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
Good luck with
I
that.
I can handle it. And I'm
Right.
like, you know what? But you
Mm,
don't have to. Like, it's not,
mm,
you don't have to handle it. Like, this is part of the whole bigger picture. It's part of the whole big work. So I'm
yeah.
guessing I just want to know more from you about this. I'm sorry, I'm just really picking your brain deep
No,
here.
no, I love this. These are things, this is part of my mission to get some of this stuff out there that's so insulated in the psychoanalytic institutes, because there's just so much good stuff there. And not even psychoanalytic. I'll broaden that out to psychodynamic work, relational work,
Yes, the
relational work, because
relational piece
the
here is what
relational
I'm
piece.
really, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And I think that that's because we throw around the word all the time, Amy, therapeutic relationship, therapeutic alliance. However, I like to drill down and ask people, well, what the hell does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean joining? Does that mean being an ally? Does that mean what I see it though is as a crucible? I see it as the relationship, the therapeutic relationship, relationships in general, but especially a therapeutic relationship, supervisory relationship is a safe space for rupture and repair. It's not meant to be peaches and cream, daisies and rainbows, unicorns. It's not meant to be always um, just how do I put it? A conflict-free space. It's okay to have feelings towards your supervisor. It's okay to have feelings towards your therapist. I can't tell you how many times I've had supervisees who've come to me and they're talking about their therapeutic process, and they're like, well, I'm learning this stuff from you, and my therapist just isn't, I don't know, they aren't providing, they're falling short in some ways. And I'm like, well, have you told them? And no. So really trying to teach people to say everything, to do the therapeutic assignment and say everything. And in a robust supervisory relationship, even take out the supervisory, in a robust relationship, right, between two people, there's created safety where you can have an incredible experience to say something that you're afraid to say, to have the supervisor hold that. And wow, the growth that occurs from that can't be contained in any textbook. However, there's an art to it, and it's an incredibly difficult thing to do with supervisors too. Our egos have to be strong enough to take that. And we have to remember our duty, that it's our duty to hold safe space for these individuals seeking guidance from us.
You know, I wonder if it's something that we're not doing a great job of teaching at the graduate school level, and then it's not translating into the work, because I'm seeing new supervisees being uncomfortable with the work going awry in session. So for example, we do a lot of work with kids in my practice. And one of the things I do often is trigger kids on purpose, because I need them in a safe space to show me how they dysregulate, so that I can, in a safe space, help them come back to regulation, because I'm fully regulated, I'm calm, and I need to show them what it is to feel, how it is to feel safe. And so or if I'm with a teenager, I need to I need to challenge them. And so a lot of times like, I'm not there to be their friend. I'm there to move them in a direction. But oftentimes I see clinicians not trying those kinds of things. They're very afraid of upsetting the client or upsetting the apple cart, making things worse. And I think, well, isn't this the place that you're supposed to be practicing those things? Isn't this the place that you're supposed to be seeing those things happen? I had a client a couple months ago who literally sat in the waiting room for half an hour screaming how much she hated me. It was so pleasant. It was just really super pleasant. But I knew and we repaired it and it was all okay. And she came back the next week. And I knew that that was part of the process. Like it had to happen because
Right.
I couldn't coddle that, like that experience. Like I knew, but I also knew where I had messed up. And so that was like
Exactly. Love it.
it was a great
Yes.
experience. Like I
Yes.
knew I had pushed her at a time where she didn't need to be pushed, but she also figured out that she also pushed a boundary. She also violated an expectation. And
Mhm.
so we learned and we repaired and it was great.
Yes.
But
Yes.
my whole team, I'm the boss, and my whole team was like mortified that this
Which I
client was
bet.
screaming, I hate Dr. Amy. She's the worst. I hate her. And I'm like, okay, you
Mhm.
hate me. Okay. I don't hate you. I like you very much. And I'll see you
Mhm.
next week. I'm very calm, whatever. And
Oh.
they were mortified.
Mhm.
But, and I said, like, this is how we're going to repair it. And this is the mistake. And I think it was a big deal, for everyone to sort of figure out this is what it looks like.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. Well, you make me think about it. We throw around these terms of safe space, right? And we need to have safe space. We need to have, trauma centric, trauma informed care, all really, really important. I like to think about things. We need to have safe enough space, right? The therapeutic environment is not a vacuum of complete safety and insulated from everything. If anything, we need an optimal level of frustration for people to grow. Now that we want to err on the side of caution with that, we don't want to push people too hard, right? And I always try to think about that. How am I frustrating my clients optimally? Just a classic example, client leaves the session and then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, there's an email saying, oh my gosh, what did you think about this? Da, 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 da. Now, the inclination might be like, let me go be helpful. Let me answer this email. Let me text back. And for me, it's just, I'm going to hold this and we'll talk about next session. And clients, I think, have a lot more resiliency oftentimes and a lot more ability to repair than we give them credit for. So it's really a balancing act. It really is a balancing act. And also too, a lot of it just comes from clinical intuition gained over years of experience. However, what I'm seeing at the graduate level and undergraduate level with interns and supervisees is there's such a quick move to fix it and such a quick move to take intervention to down regulate, right? To immediately placate the situation, to be active. And there's just so much to be said in being able to hold the space, hold the silences. There's a saying in the Tao Te Ching, the Eastern philosophy text, when the water's muddy, right, you may want to thrash around, right? Or when you're in quicksand, you definitely want to thrash around. And really, the right action to do is just to be still. And oftentimes the right action comes from itself, not from
I
a
love that.
textbook, not from a research lab, but just comes from itself. Yeah. So a
Yeah,
lot of
that's
times
beautiful.
I'm just telling clinicians to stay still.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
If one thing I
Yeah.
could teach listeners on here, a technique, if you want to say something in session, write down on your clipboard, wait,
Oh yeah.
WAIT, and say, why am I talking?
Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir. I teach my students that all the time. Why am I talking? If I want to say something, I do the exact same thing. So you and I learned from the same school that I learned that exact same thing. And that's something I think about all the time. Like I don't need to be saying anything right now. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
and I think too, this is something I'm borrowing from psychedelic medicine, psychedelic informed therapy. You know, particularly ketamine assisted psychotherapy. Also, this draws from IFS, internal family systems, where we have this inner intelligence. That's the psychedelic medicine term for it. IFS, thanks to Emily Powell for teaching me this on my previous podcast, self energy, this energy within self. And I think that when we are training, again, these protocolized, manualized treatments are wonderful. However, they can give the illusion that the knowledge, that the wisdom is externalized. And really, so much of the healing wisdom comes from within, not the therapist, but from within the client. And we need supervisory experiences and supervisors that are able to convey that to therapists, because by waiting, oftentimes that's how you bring forth that inner intelligence.
So so what you're saying is supervisors need to be able to convey this idea that supervisees need to be more patient, need to
Yeah,
be able to sort of sit in the silence and be more able to trust that their client has some inner wisdom to share if they just are willing to sort of wait for it. And
exactly.
also be willing to sort of allow the client to sort of test the waters and maybe, challenge the client to use their own inner wisdom in this safe space.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a very action oriented therapist as well. Last thing I want is to see you for 27 years, 4 times a week, laying on the couch and saying everything. So I think combining the ability to hold space and wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. And then oftentimes at the end of sessions, I get very action oriented. I take what I've heard during session and then I kind of collate it. And then oftentimes, clients in DBT, that's wonderful, because then we have this DBT matrix to apply and give really actionable skills. So we can have that two-pronged approach. They don't need to be exclusive. The DBTers and the psychodynamicists can be talking with the IFS people, with the CBT people. And that's another thing too, I really try to convey to the individuals that I supervise is we need to look at this holistically. We need to be looking at other theories. We need to be really looking how to not necessarily pick too, to be eclectic. Oh, I'm going to pick this technique or this technique, but really look at how we're marrying and integrating theories in a high fidelity way. And in a way that also fits clinicians. As we talked earlier, I'm all about trying to help clinicians find their theoretical orientation. However, the theoretical orientation often finds the clinicians in who they are as human beings and the way that they want to practice.
Yeah, this idea of assisting, your clinicians with integrating theories that work with what they believe and what they feel works, for their clients, I think is really key. And being able to bring fidelity to their work from these different theories, I think is really key, is significant. Because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people think, well, I'm gonna really, dive deep into this one theory. I'm going to know it really, really well. And then I'm going to be an expert at this. But then you find, well, this doesn't actually work with this particular person. And so then you think, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not actually good at this. Well, no, it's just that this particular technique is not necessarily, effective for this particular issue for this client. And so having a menu of options is, I think, important.
A
So,
menu of options, yeah, and to be able to embody that, as we talked earlier, and this is one of my big things I've stumbled upon, is therapeutic humility.
mm,
What are the values that we are practicing by? And I find that one of the most important values, time and time again, is humility as a therapist, humility as an expert, humility as in the field in general. That's something that has really helped me evolve in the past year as a clinician. I feel like I've gone through a growth spurt in my 20 plus year. I finally have hit puberty. I finally
I love it. I love it. I think this is fantastic. I'm going to join you because I love this idea of therapeutic humility. Tell us a little bit more about it.
therapeutic humility. It's something that I came across in reading. I have a therapeutic reading group, a therapy reading group where a number of clinicians and students come together and we read academic articles. So I feel like oftentimes after schooling, we stop reading or we stop studying. And through this group, we read articles. And one of them that really struck me is preserving our humanity as therapists. And one of the things that was really communicated in that article, or what really struck me, and this might be my interpretation of it, is that we are so human. And in this clinical pursuit, this clinical psychology pursuit, atomizing, reducing, right, these illnesses or these presentations and the treatments for it, we lose the bigger picture. the ability to kind of see that there's so much outside of the clinician, as you had said previously, the more macro systems that are influencing us, right? So being able to zoom in, zoom out, and have inclusive conversations, have friendly conversations with other schools of thought, not taking everything at face value. And also realizing that a lot of this stuff has come from before IFS, before DBT. Lenahan, I think, wanted to call DBT Zen behavioral therapy, right?
Oh,
So we have so much of this stuff in roots that are indigenous before Freud even. And it's important to remember that history, that rich history and theory, and not just the techniques and the modalities, because with understanding that, we can really get to that high fidelity and creative integration that we're looking for.
Yeah, I
I
love
feel
that.
like I feel like 100 years from now, the clinicians we're going to look like we were poking around in the dark.
Well, I do think it's really interesting when we still, we're still teaching theory, and yet, we're still creating theory. I mean, we're still, creating new theory now, but everything we're creating now is still based in, original thought that it's all gonna we're just recreating what we've already created. So it's nothing, I don't think anything new particularly. But much more brain-based, I guess, now more than anything else, because we know so much more about neuroscience. But I think this is really fascinating. Tell us real quick about your reading group and what you're doing now that's really exciting you, Chris.
Yeah, reading group has been just a wonderful. I just started out just to start reading with a couple people. I was getting tired of reading by myself. Although I love reading by myself. I find myself oftentimes up late at night reading academic articles or going into the DBT manual. Don't know what that says about me. I'll take that up with my analyst. But the reading group kind of really flourished, though, in terms of about a year ago, I started it, and I have an archive of articles, and I started sharing them. I started sharing them online, and I found this real hunger for this sense of community and the sense of community around these great articles that make us think about things in a different fashion. And it's interesting, a lot of this stuff is older stuff. So we're taught, even when I was finishing my doctorate and doing my dissertation, my chair was like, don't really want you pulling any research past 5, maybe 10 years at most. However, if we go back into the literature, there is just so much rich stuff, particularly for me, the existential psychologies that got cut off with managed care. Like we had this very rich movement of relational psychologies that just got cut off when managed care came in, and we needed observable and measurable outcomes. And also going back into the psychoanalytic literature. And it's just been such a wonderful thing. We meet every 2 weeks, and it's just an open forum. We actually started recording them because I figured, wow, there's just so much great material in here outside of the usual content that we see online, tips, techniques, tricks to manage your anxiety, but the deeper stuff as to what it means to be human, the why of it. And I think this is something that's missing from supervision, something that also feeds the supervisors, such as myself. We need to stay excited about the work. And biggest thing is community, because it can be so easy, especially in private practice, to get so isolated. And I think that we really need to blow open those doors, not just to share knowledge and push theory forward, but also just to hold each other, provide these
Yeah.
holding environments for us to flourish.
Yep, absolutely. I think that that's fantastic. I love all the work that you're doing, Chris. Tell me, if you were not a clinician right now, what would you be doing? What would be your alternative job?
It's interesting to think about that. I mean, first off, I would like to do nothing for a while. I would like to
Okay.
travel. I would just like to be. And you know what? This actually ties back to what we were talking about. We teach so many people how to, like, how do you do therapy? Doctor supervisor, teach me to do therapy. And I really think we need to move towards being, more of a sense of being in this world, being a therapist, right? What does that, but what would I want to do? I sometimes have fantasies of going into like the health tech industry for some reason. A little bit of a shout out to Amy's story with humans in healthcare for that fantasy. Honestly, I took one psychology class in undergrad. I was a triple major in philosophy, English, and religion. So I probably would want to become a writer of books, if people even write books anymore. and
Sure.
just live a creative life, maybe a bit of a nomadic life, and then figure out which country I want to drop into, and just
Wow.
have it work out from there.
I
Yeah.
think that sounds amazing. That sounds
But
amazing.
in some sense, embodying I have such a mission to lead the next generation of clinicians, and not just to clinicians. I feel like therapy and therapy practices can be infused throughout the whole healthcare system. Everyone from who picks up the phone, right? That's where the therapy starts, that initial contact, right? Who
Mhm.
picks up the phone to who does the intake to who the case management, all those I think can be informed by theory, practice, and good supervision. So
Yeah.
I'll think about that. I haven't given thought to that. And that's interesting because a lot of therapists have trouble seeing themselves outside of the field.
Yeah. I love your enthusiasm for the work, Chris. I really, really do. And your enthusiasm for interns and the next generation of supervisors, supervisees,
Yeah,
and clinicians is just you know, really, really palpable. So I really appreciate it. And it's really been fun to hang out with you this morning. I really appreciate
absolutely.
you being here. Yeah. Thank you so much to you and for everybody for tuning into this episode of Supervision Simplified. Remember that the revolution starts here, and we hope that you'll subscribe to Supervision Simplified and that you'll share it with your friends and colleagues, and that you'll also join Chris in one of his reading groups sometime soon and find us both on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep on simplifying and elevating your supervision game. Thanks so much for having us
Thanks,
on
Amy.
today.
Thanks for
Take care.
elevating me.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye bye.